Welcome. So this week, the topic will be the grooves in our mind. And in modern neuroscience, there's a phrase that I bet you heard. It's become so ubiquitous. That which fires together, wires together. It's just a way for neuroanatomists to explain to us lay people a strategy that the brain employs, and the most consistent thoughts and perceptions wire together and become a habitual pattern inside of our brain. A baby's brain is an infinite potential field of possible connections and wirings. I read once that the human brain has more possible connections than there are subatomic particles in the universe, which is such a stunning idea that I had to double, triple confirm it, but it's true. Our brain has more potential connections in it than the subatomic particles in the universe, which obviously is a number so staggering, but it shows the potential in our brain. But the brain of a baby with this potential, it has to be pared down and selectively develop patterns of perception. Otherwise, the world just remains an infinite miasma of stimulation, and there's no dependable reality that forms in the mind of a child. But boy, it doesn't take very long. By the age of 7, they say that the patterns in our brain, the deepest ones, have been so wired in that they are essentially permanent. And this is a daunting thought, but it appears to be true. Now, the great yogis of antiquity, they of course had the same idea, because wisdom and intelligence is what it is, irrespective of age, just has different language. And the great yogis of antiquity called these wirings in our brain grooves or ruts, and they called them samskara. Samskara, the Sanskrit word for rut or groove. So by the time we're 7 or 8, we have perceptual patterns so deeply grooved into our brain. And these patterns of perception, they basically outline and express the world that we see outside of us. Fortunately, in the last few decades, neuroscientists have discovered that we have something called neuroplasticity. We can change these fundamental patterns in our brain. It was thought for many decades that we couldn't. But both the yogis and the anatomists say it takes quite an exceptional act of will and energy and intention to change these patterns in our brain. This week, we'll talk about what it is that changes these deep grooves or ruts in our brain where the mental energy flows. And these ruts or grooves become so habitual that we, to a large degree, run on autopilot. We run with automatic and habitual reactions to things. And it's the good news and the bad news. It's the good news when our habitual patterns of perception are harmonious, functional, positive. But it's the bad news when our habitual grooves in our mind channel patterns of perception that are dysfunctional, painful, miserable, unpleasant. So we can change those. Meditation is our number one tool, but there are others, and we're going to talk about it all this week. So this week, simply ponder, think about the perceptual patterns in your own brain that are locked in place, that have shrunk an infinite world of potential down into the world that we see. It's not a bad thing or a good thing, but it is. And as humans, we have the capacity to open up and unblock and unlock these knots of perception to let a much greater worldview come in. But it does take intention, it does take action, it does take will, and it does take energy. So let's talk about it during the week. And may your grooves and ruts be positive. And if you run across a troublesome one, this whole week we'll discover how to dig a new one. Have a great week, everybody. See you tomorrow. We'll continue the conversation.